Hi, welcome to Journey with Jess. I'm your host, Jessica Monge, and today we're going to be talking about masculinity. We're going to be talking about this topic with my good friend, Sergio. I met Sergio back in college through Greek life. If you don't know what that really means, it means that I'm in a sorority and he's in a fraternity, and that's how we met. Sergio and I have been really good friends since college, and one of the things that helps me, I think, trust him and open up to him as an individual is that he's so emotionally in tune for a typical man, right? So in this episode, we're going to be touching upon masculinity, what that means, him, what that means for him and his experiences as a man, navigating mental health and emotions, being the youngest of three, being the only boy of three, and how that really shaped his growing up and how he's grown from being that kid I met in college to now the young adult that he is. So I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments or shoot me a message. Who are you, Sergio? Who are you really?
That's interesting. I know that's big. I don't know. There's a lot to say, I think.
Sergio, thank you for being on my podcast. Why don't you tell me a little bit about you and your mental health history in general?
So I'm 25 now, right? Obviously, you know that. But I think that talking about mental health and thinking about it too, was something that has only more recently happened in my 20s.
Okay.
And I think that before, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, when I was a kid, I had these feelings. Sometimes they were confusing or just really upsetting. And I didn't really know what to make of them,
right.
And so I kind of just felt them, experienced them, and then it was just kind of a part of life, as opposed to something that would be something you could reflect on. In my early 20s, after kind of a lot of things happened with me and my family, I started really having to think about the feelings that I was having and really how I was reacting to what was going on in my life.
Yeah. Why do you think you weren't able to talk about it? I feel like it's obvious, but...
Well, I mean, I think it depends, but I think really for me, I would say that one of them was that I didn't really know how to approach my feelings, but also not just seeing them and experiencing them, but also understanding them and thinking about, why might I feel that way?
Okay.
And so I think that's what it was. That was part of it, that I could know I'm upset right now.
Right.
I'm sad, I'm feeling this, but I sometimes didn't understand why.
Okay.
And also didn't really know what to do anyways, even if I knew what I was feeling.
Why do you feel like you couldn't?
Honestly, I think that part of it was that to be kind of aware of yourself, I think requires a lot of emotional intelligence. Not being around people who know about that and also do the same, have that same process of reflecting on themselves and also kind of teaching you that, hey, it's important to think about yourself and not just think about what you do, job, career, school, whatever, but also think about what you feel, what you're thinking about and why you think that way. Not having that be something that's normal around you, instead of just having people around you who have feelings, and express them and talk about feelings, which is still an important thing too, but also talking about why we have those feelings and what we can do about them. I think that takes a certain level of emotional intelligence and sometimes a little bit of training, and I think for most people it really takes practice.
Yeah.
And I think everyone, it takes practice.
Yeah, definitely practice and a lot of training, like you said, in general.
Yeah.
Do you think you didn't see that around you because of your gender or because of your culture or both?
Well, one thing, right, when it comes to my family life is that I was raised as I was the only boy in the family because I didn't live with my dad growing up because, my parents got divorced and everything. I remember that one thing that I saw a lot kind of growing up and just getting older and stuff like that was just that it was kind of a little bit better and kind of, I don't know, not necessarily more celebrated, but people looked more positively towards me to be the person that was more, well, first off, fair, but also kind of impartial to an extent and kind of reasonable. Right?
And you were the youngest.
And I was the youngest. Yeah, no, weird.
Which is so crazy to me.
It's true. Yeah, I was exactly, right? I was the youngest.
Yeah.
But I think part of it was because I was the guy. So my sisters, they'd be arguing, they'd be fighting, whatever. And then that's when they asked me for my opinion because it's oh no, he's not a catty girl who will get into this, an argument, with the mom, with our mom or with the sisters. He's just a boy. He's himself, he's independent. I think there's other things at play too, but I think part of it was also gender, in terms of he's the guy, so he's level-headed.
It's crazy because it's so much pressure for a guy, and being the youngest, it's kind of you guys always have to be impartial, or there's this stereotype about it, and it's why you guys also have emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. And I don't know. I also saw myself too. And I see it in myself too now. But when it comes to being in that certain like dynamic with my family specifically, I saw that as I got older, I like emoted less and less and wasn't as like emotional with them as I was when I was younger. That is kind of something that I'm more used to seeing when it comes to like men in my family and just in general, what seems to be more normal, really, what I remember being young. I think culture has played a part in it, you know. I think that's part of it too, because that's what I see in my family. You know, they have a certain way of being. And I think a large part of it too is just that, you know, not having reflection and kind of examination of like the self be a regular part of your life. I think it's hard to come to that yourself, because then you have to find it out yourself and you have to teach yourself or be around others who will teach you.
Was there like a big turning point where you decided I need to be more emotionally intelligent or like actually pay attention to my emotions?
There's a few things in my mind that come up, but I think that once I became an adult, and this was more like in college after I had kind of moved to New York to live with my dad again, and I had essentially kind of been doing everything on my own. I still live with my family, of course, because it's New York. But my day was always determined by me. I did what I essentially wanted to do, and there was no constraints with anyone. I paid for my own stuff, you know, and I made my own decisions. But what I saw kept happening was that I would get into situations with people that were really confusing, you know, and that I would like not forget about, like, and I would keep remembering them over and over. And in my mind, I'm like, you know, why is this bothering me so much? And so really the older I got, especially when I became an adult and I was really the one caring for myself, I just started kind of to realize that there was something kind of bothering me in the back of my head, and it was really affecting me. Most of my time, I would kind of just move on and roll along, you know, because that's kind of what I've always done. You know, and I still have that tendency just to kind of move forward and not look back too much. But I realized more and more that I carry things with me as I go, you know, and it's not like, oh, you could just live every day, whatever, you know, it like, oh, like yesterday doesn't matter. It does matter, you know, and I started to realize that more and more. And it was only after this is like at the end of college already, after I got into my last relationship, well, my current one, that my girlfriend basically told me like, hey, look, there's a lot going on in our relationship and stuff like that. But what I want from you is I want you to be able to talk to me about your emotions. You know, like, I know that, you know, you treat me well and all that, but I want to hear it from you. I want to hear what you feel, you know? And so that was definitely one of the, like an impetus that helped me kind of, well, first off, get into therapy, but also made me realize that if I am not necessarily meeting a certain standard of like being emotionally open with people, you know, that I am doing a disservice to them and to myself as well, and to the relationship that I could have with that person. I think it's really wonderful to be able to be emotionally open with someone, you know, and let them know how you feel about them.
So when Emily told you that, I reflect with that 100%, because I also had to go through the same thing with Golam. Treated me nice, amazing guy, love him, but I was like, I need you to talk to me more. Like, you don't express anything whatsoever. And I figured it was because he was the oldest guy. He always had to take responsibility. So for when she told you that, was it easy for you to start opening up? Was it hard? How was that journey in your relationship?
It was difficult, I'll be honest with you, because the feeling that I had in my mind was like, which I don't know, maybe Gola might relate to, but it was like, I'm a good boyfriend.
No, he was just like, I'm doing everything right. I'm treating you well. I bring you coffee. It's like, I love that. Thank you. But like, are you happy? Like, tell me. At one point I was like, I don't know if I'm annoying you with these questions, but like, are you happy? He's like, of course I am. But I saw that in my dad too. Like, he would also like be very emotionless, and I'm just like, I can't get a read off of you. And that's why everybody sees my dad and they're like, I don't know if he's happy.
Honestly, I feel the same way about your dad. You know, the few times that I've met him, I'm like, you upset with me, or you good?
And he's like, I'm having the time of my life. What are you talking about? But it's good. Like, we see the end result of like not talking about it so much, and it's like true. Those men, right? So continue with your how you felt.
No, absolutely. No, of course. I mean, it's true, and it's obviously it's a pattern, right? It's I know it's not just me. You know, so I'm like, I know that this is something that, like I said, I've seen everywhere you go. That kind of idea, I feel like, often crosses cultural boundaries. Like, obviously there's different cultures where maybe it's a little bit different. But what I've seen here in New York, in America, that is often how it is. From what I've seen, that men, patriarchs or whatever, the men of the family, are meant to be tough or, like I said, level-headed. So I don't know, but it definitely is a pattern that I see. When Emily told me that, and we talked about it, and and obviously she had to tell me many times, because it's not something easy to change. I remember I felt very frustrated. And the thing is that I know Emily, of course, was frustrated too. Honestly, it caused a lot of tension in our relationship, and it was really difficult for me because, like I said, I did feel like I was doing my best. And the thing was that I was. I was doing what I was capable of and what I had been used to doing at that point. Because that was my playbook. Like, be nice, take them out. They ask you to do something, do it for them because you want to show that you appreciate them. But having that conversation, talking about those feelings was not. Wasn't part of my playbook. And so it was really frustrating at first. And it took a while. Even after I got into therapy, it took a long time of talking about it and talking about it with Emily and kind of going back and forth. And it was really baby steps. Like I tried slowly just to get better at it. And our relationship now is much better in terms of communication. I know that one of my go-tos is that, and when I feel like defensive, that I can get really quiet, like what I have been in the past. And so, but that's, of course, it's natural because unfortunately, that's how I am.
And everybody has their different like coping mechanisms or, triggers. So
exactly. And that's my coping mechanism. Take a seat back and just like basically become like a turtle, just hide within the shell, So it's still a process, and it's still something that I work on, especially when I don't feel safe. But really our relationship and the communication has gotten better, but it really took a long time. It took, honestly, probably for me to like actually be a little bit more open and emotional with her, like a year and a half.
I think that's pretty common. Yeah, you do have to take baby steps on I want people to know that everybody's relationship is different. For some people, it might take longer. Golem and I have been together for 5 years, almost 6, and we still talk about these little things. It's different parts of a man's journey, I think, to open up and stuff. And some things they just think they're doing enough and it's fine. And it'll be a continuous conversation. But if you're in a healthy relationship, your partner is going to want you to talk about your emotions and stuff because they care about you. If they only want you to do material things, that could be their love language, but if they don't want you to listen to their emotions and stuff, that might, I don't know, a little red flag.
And I think the one thing I do want to mention too is that I know that we're talking about it in the context of men, right? Because obviously that's how I see the world. That's what I experience. But I know that from my own experience, and from my own family and from people that I know and relationships that I've been in, women can also be just as emotionally closed too. And not even emotionally closed because they can tell you their feelings.
It's a different emotionally closed.
Exactly. Where it's like when it becomes difficult, it's like where they will do the same thing that I do, where they will just kind of close up. Like I think about one relationship that I had before, and that was one of the things that was difficult because we were both the same in that way. That when it came to the emotional part of like communicating, it was kind of a little difficult to do that, where we both kind of were like, no, this is hard. I gotta back up. Down. Exactly. I was like, nope, we're gonna back up, and obviously it didn't work out. But that's just the one thing I did want to mention with that, where I'm like, I definitely see it within myself and I see it a lot with men, but I've also in my own life, in my own family and like I said, in relationships I've had, I've seen the same exact thing.
No, I think that's really interesting you brought it up because I've also seen it in a lot of girlfriends. It also doesn't matter about age, right? Because it could be the last child, it could be the oldest, but it's whoever takes that role of third parent, second parent in the house in general, they end up shutting down a lot more because they're not supposed to show emotions. They're supposed to be unbiased and get shit done, basically. And that's probably what you had to go through. What's your age gap with your sisters again?
Well, my older sister is barely a year older than me. And then my oldest sister is, I think, 4 years older than me.
Okay, that's a big gap and stuff.
Yeah, it is.
So that's frustrating. I think one of my friends, her gap with her brother is 2 years, but she is also very much like the caretaker. She takes all the responsibility. Also, when she finds an emotional person, she's like, nope, I don't want it. Because she's not used to having someone want to take care of her, be emotional, all these other things. But it's a learning curve, You want to be in a safe space where people want to take care of you. But when you're in like, kind of like flight mode, right? I feel like that's more fight or flight. I think it's more flight, or you run away from someone who's emotional. And you're not used to it.
It's a lot like playing dead.
Like, I'm letting you play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, go away.
Yeah.
So on the topic of like how you see the world and stuff, What does masculinity mean to you?
That's kind of changed for me a lot. Honestly, I don't really see myself as a very masculine person. There's moments where I do see that in myself, you know, where I'm like, oh yeah, sure, you know, this is more like a masculine thing to do or a masculine way to act. But it's really hard for me, I'll be honest with you, you know, to kind of think about it that way, because I feel like I tend to be someone that's very sensitive. You know, I know I am a sensitive person in general. Physically sensitive, but also emotionally sensitive. I feel a lot. I feel for others a lot. I think that that's not a traditionally very masculine thing, you know?
I agree.
And that's kind of one of the biggest things in my head that kind of often when I think about like my own masculinity, honestly, it is a little difficult for me because I see the way that people, like when I think about this, actually, I think about this because I work with kids. You know this, I work with kids in foster care. And so when I first started, I work with youth who are like middle schoolers, high schoolers, college kids. So, you know, I work with young men of different ages. But I remember when I first started, I was worried when I was working with the young men on my caseload. I was worried that they were going to look at me and be like, he's a pussy, you know? Or wait, should I not?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I should have asked you before. But okay,
no,
so...
I first.
Okay, good. So anyways, I thought that they'd think like, oh, you know, he's a little too like, I don't know, like soft. I've always really gotten along well with women. You know, like obviously you and I have a really wonderful relationship. And a part of that, I think, really is because I'm very comfortable, you know, talking to women and having like rich friendships with women. You know, it's very normal for me. And it's much more comfortable for me. When it came time to work with the young men, you know, I was always worried like, man, you know, they're not going to like me. I'm like, how am I going to get along with them? And one thing that I've kind of thought about is that first off, the people that I work with, the young people I work with, the young men respond to me more than the young women. And it's really interesting because it just made me think like about my own like thoughts about masculinity and like reflecting on it myself, where I'm like, these young boys, you know, these young men are looking at me and saying, you know, I like him, I want to be around him. You know, I feel like that says a lot about what masculinity can be, you know, and that it can be about caring for someone else, and then that it can be about having respect for someone, and I don't know, and also just thinking about that other person's well-being, that it can be about compassion, that it doesn't just have to be about doing what is right, being very moral or being successful, you know, that it doesn't necessarily have to be about that, but that it can be about a connection that you have with someone, you know, but I don't know at the same time, but that is kind of where my mind goes when I think about my own masculinity and how I've been received by young men.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how do you think you thought, like teenage Sergio thought about?
You know, it's funny. It's actually, you know, what comes over my head is something that I don't think about often. My mom, when we were younger, and this is kind of part of the issue, right? So my mom is gay, or queer, I'm not sure. She changes with the seasons. But my mom is someone who has been with both women and men. And I remember growing up, sometimes she would say, oh yeah, like, you're gay. You know, like, I know you're gay because of the way that you act, you know, and I remember that was kind of always really offensive to me because I'm like, I don't like men, you know, I'm like, I think I would know it. At least I'd have a hint that I was gay. I'm like, but at the same time, like, maybe I don't know. Because, I mean, she's gay, so who's to say, right? I'm like, you know, I don't know. So she was low-key, like, gaslighting me into thinking I was gay. God. But no, but I did know that I wasn't. Because I'm like, I like women, you know? I'm like, so at least I'm definitely not gay, but you are confusing me. But that was kind of something that made me think, too, about my own behavior. Like, oh, I must be acting like a woman, or I must be acting like a gay man. You know, and so that influenced the way that I acted too, you know, because I'm like, oh, if I'm being a certain way, you know, obviously I'm being too feminine, or I'm being too soft, or I'm being too this, you know, and so I forgot your question, but that came to mind when you, wait, what was your question again?
I forgot. Oh no, okay. So my question was, what do you think teenage Sergio would have seen masculinity as? Like, how would he define it?
Masculinity, to me, was the opposite of caring. You know, it was like, oh no, like, you're gonna be tough. You're gonna be like, cool.
Cool.
Yeah, you're gonna be cool. You're gonna be silent.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
tough, cool, and silent. Like that's what it means to be a man. And if you have money, great. If you get some kind of success,
Right.
just being successful. So at that point, it was school. Yeah, being ambitious, tough, cool, silent, all of it.
So, do you think masculinity and machismo are different or the same?
Honestly, I think that they're just kind of like not necessarily like two sides of the same coin, right? Like I think machismo is still about masculinity, but for me, it's when I think about it, it's just kind of it's just a certain form of like aggressive masculinity.
I feel like machismo, when I think about it, is more aggressive.
Yeah, and it's often, I feel like when it comes to being machismo, it almost reminds me of like having to be tough when you're tough on kids, like when you're being strict or something like that. It's like about letting people know that this is not okay. And it's about like asserting boundaries. Like there's this one story. I don't think I've ever told you this story, but I went to a bar once with a cousin of mine, and my family had gone there before, so they took us. So me and my cousin, who's my same age, so at the time I think we were 22 or 21 or 22. And so we went into this bar, and it was a very Hispanic bar, like all Hispanic people, right? And so everyone spoke Spanish, cool, fine. So my cousin, she sits down at the bar, and there is a stool between her and some man who was already there drinking, hanging out, drinking Heineken, whatever.
Okay.
But then the thing was, he had like his leg, I think, on the stool.
Oh, okay.
And I just sat on the stool, right? But I remember I was worried. I'm like, ooh, should I sit on this stool? Because I don't know about this guy. And he has his leg on the stool. I'm like, he might see it as an insult, right? But I still did it. I was like, whatever. Yeah.
You're like YOLO.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. So anyway, so I sat down, right? And I could see him staring at me from the corner of my eye, just staring at me. And he was right next to me.
God.
So I'm like, wait a second. And so I ordered drinks for me and my cousin. We're chilling. And then he gets up. And then, all of a sudden, he grabs his beer bottle, right? And then he goes right next to me and then pours the entire thing on the bar in front of me. The whole thing. He just pours it out. Yeah, he just pours it out, right? And I'm like...
That's a waste of money.
Yeah, exactly, right? And in my mind, I'm like, what the hell? Yeah. And he's like, and he whispers in my ear, like, I know your family. Like, I'm going to come back and, like, I'm going to kill them. Yes, he said all that to me. This man said all that to me. Why? And in my mind, I'm like, what are you talking about? And
because you sat on a chair.
Because I sat on a chair between him and my cousin.
That's psychotic.
He didn't do anything. I told him, I was like, good night. I didn't know what to say to him. I'm like, okay. I was like, okay. I was like, all right. And then he left. Ooh. But that's kind of what always comes to mind when I think about machismo. Yeah. It's like, obviously, that's very extreme. Right? But it's still the same thing. Yeah. Trying to show like, this is not cool. This is my boundary. You're not doing this. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like this extreme form of just like how when I feel defensive or unsafe, like I will get really quiet and reserved. Yeah. Like, I feel like
aggressive.
Exactly. I feel like that's just a reaction to things that, that maybe make them feel unsafe or unhappy or whatever. I don't know why he felt unsafe that way, but obviously it was an affront to him. And so he had to show those boundaries,
I think it also kind of was like, he probably thought it was disrespectful that you sat there because it was his chair for whatever reason. He had his leg on it.
Yeah.
You know what I think of when I think about like machismo and stuff? Those guys on the train who just like open hella wide. And I'm just like, you're taking up 3 seats, dude.
Absolutely.
Bro.
Absolutely. It's true. One of my kids... actually, he's not one of my kids, but one of the kids that we work with at the agency, he was the other day, came in last week, right? Was like, I was on the train and some guy was looking for problems and, I was sitting down and then he was trying to sit right next to me and it was like really close. And I said, no, you're not sitting here today. Whatever. I'm not going to get close with you like that. You're not my girlfriend. Something like that, right? Just like a big outsized reaction to somebody sitting close to him. And so I hear this and I'm like, okay. But apparently, our friend was taking up 2 seats on the train. And so, of course, the person who wanted to sit down was like, hey, look, you can take 1 seat. Like, let me sit here. And that's the reaction that he got. Obviously, I work with very specific kids with certain issues, certain traumas, where that kind of reaction might be necessary. in their heads that they feel that they have to assert themselves in that way. You know, but it's the same exact thing. It's like, he's not Hispanic, but it's still that same having to like be tough and like big and masculine, like, oh, you're not messing with me. I don't know. Like I said, I think it's just kind of, it's a very similar reaction. But when I think of being machismo, masculinity and stuff like that, that's what I think, especially machismo. It's like you trying to protect yourself.
Interesting point that he mentioned, you're not my girlfriend, you're not sitting close to me. A lot of machismo is also like very homophobic at the same time.
Absolutely.
Like whenever I see it, it's always like, you can't be next to me because I'm not gay. I'm sitting next, like if someone's sitting next to you, does not mean you're gay. Like, why is that your trigger? You know, it's very interesting. Very
gendered. Yeah, definitely, absolutely, gendered, and I think it also just fits into those gender roles. You know, same exact thing. It's just kind of like, and it also reinforces it, right? It's part of it. Like the guy's gonna be big and tough. He's protecting everybody, causing problems. You know,
causing so many problems.
Yeah, it's like boys will be boys kind of thing.
That excuse is so triggering. I definitely grew up with that, and it's kind of like it gives the boys an excuse to do like stupid shit. You know what I mean?
You have?
Yeah, like it gives them an excuse to like break things, act wild, not clean up after themselves and whatever. I remember for a long time my cousin was like, you should clean up your brother's room because, you know, you're his big sister. If I was his big brother, you wouldn't be saying that.
Absolutely not. Of course not. No.
It's completely sexist. And I'm like, I'm not his mom, number one. Number two, doesn't matter who cleans. It could be his girlfriend, his mom, or whoever. Yeah. It's still going to be a mess. So
absolutely. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, of course. And at the end of the day, the responsibility falls on him. You know?
I feel like for boys, when they grow up, for some families, they don't grow up with a lot of responsibilities.
Yeah.
Which is why they'll have like the work smarts, right? They'll have the technical smarts or whatever job they have, those type of smarts. But when it comes to like real life stuff, you know, real world skills and smarts, they kind of lack that sometimes. So that's probably why boys will be boys, no responsibility. Did you ever feel like you didn't know like certain things like in the real world because of that? Were you sheltered in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Especially being the only boy, you know,
especially
being the only boy and the youngest too. So that I feel like for me, yes, exactly. Because you know, being the youngest, you do get to get away with things because the older kids usually do it anyways because they have more years on this earth to do it, right? So that's already one advantage, and then the other advantage too was that I was a boy, you know, and so the youngest boy, it's like, oh no,
whatever.
So absolutely. And no, honestly, about what you're saying about like being unable to do certain things, right? Something that comes to mind is that so often men, men of any age, right? So often rely on women in their lives. I feel like that's like a big cultural understanding where it's like, oh no, what can a man do without a woman? You know, and there's there's truth to it to an extent, at the very least in how we are as a society. I get that, you know, because it is true that's exactly how it is. Most men do rely on women. But when I was younger, when I was a kid, I didn't do laundry. I would help fold clothes and stuff like that. But I didn't know how to do laundry. You know, so I wouldn't do it. I only learned that when I was an adult. And even then, I still hardly know how to do it. I can do it, but it's not like I do it well. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, you put the thing in there, you just measure the thing, you make sure that it's the right colors, the right fabrics. Sometimes you try to make sure that, you know, this is a specific fabric.
You know more than I do.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh no. Well, it's, you know how I learned it was actually Emily.
I bet.
It was Emily. Yeah, Emily was like, no, you can't put that with that. And I said, yo, I used to put everything together.
I still do.
Yeah, oh my God, I know. If I'm lazy, I'm like, you know, I put it all on cold. That's it. You know, it'll work. You know, whatever.
I'm fine.
Yeah, doing laundry, extremely important thing. Didn't know how to really do. Like by the time I was 18. And cooking, I only learned because of the pandemic. Okay. I knew how to cook breakfast, right? Eggs, because they're super easy.
I feel like everybody knows how to make breakfast.
Exactly, right? It's important. Also, you can make breakfast all times of day. All times of day. And eggs used to be cheap. So, you know, it made sense, right? It made sense. But I only learned how to make dinner, lunch, and like anything besides breakfast during the pandemic because I was just inside and I needed something to do.
Right.
And so I learned how to cook while I was in the pandemic, but that was really just because of a necessity because of the fact that we were locked up.
Yeah.
You know?
What
and
else
I was
are you gonna do?
What else? Yeah, I'm like, what we do every day is eat. Yeah. I'm like, so I want to be able to make food and make food that I like, you know? So yes, absolutely. I would clean though. I would still clean. So I've always known how to clean. Okay. My family was big on cleaning. I would wash the dishes, you know. I would clean the walls. We had to scrub the walls
wow.
sometimes. Yeah, no, that was too much.
Damn.
I don't want to get into all that.
That's a lot.
I know, because my mom was a housekeeper for
so
years.
she knew how to clean.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and so she would make us do the same thing.
Damn.
And it was too much.
Clean
it was
the walls.
I know. I don't
with
like.
a toothbrush.
Yeah, I know. With a rag. We're like that.
God.
Oh my god.
Your apartment must have been really clean.
It was. It was usually houses because we lived in Florida. So it was.
Wow.
I would go around the whole house just.
That's a big space.
Scrubbing.
Damn.
Yeah. Oh my god. It was child labor. It was child labor, Jessica. It's not fair. It's not right.
It's not fair. Oh my god. Okay. No wait. That's so funny because. You kind of had to grow up fast emotionally, but then the other stuff, you didn't have the responsibilities. I think that's super interesting.
You know, something I see, especially because I work in a service role, you know, where I work with people and I do social work. I'm sure you relate to this too, but you do give yourself to that person. Emotionally, you really do. Even if you are doing something as simple as like something that is very procedural, you know, like you're doing step 1, step 2, step 3, an evaluation, taking notes, and then follow up, something like that, right? You still get a glimpse into that person's lives, and you really start to sympathize with them, and they kind of become a part of, I don't know, like the way that you feel, you know what I mean? And you build a relationship with them, you know? It's like they're almost not necessarily a friend, but like maybe how you would feel about, the way that I think about it is like a younger sibling. You know, being part of that work where you care for others too, it's just become such a central part of my life now that I've been thinking about it a lot and thinking about how much to care for others while also making sure to care for myself first, you know?
How do you feel that you express care for others versus how you express care for yourself?
I think that for others, I try to make sure that they are happy in the sense that usually, right, the way that I see someone is being happy is usually by helping them do things, right? So like with my kids in my job, what I've done is so often like we work on goals together, and so we try to get, you know, A, B, and C done, whatever that might be. And so for me, you know, the way that I feel about it is I feel very fulfilled when they complete A, B, and C.
Right.
You know, and so, but it's also just naturally how I feel about people, you know, like with my family and stuff like that, and with friends. Like, if they ask me for something, I'm going to try to get it done for them because I want to make sure that they can feel fulfilled in that way. I want to make them feel fulfilled, you know? And so I think that that's kind of how it shows up, just how I treat others. And then when it comes to myself, I think that just sometimes I can ignore my own needs, you know, and not necessarily prioritize myself. And it is something that I'm thinking about more. And trying to kind of like more like accommodate that in my life.
Okay.
So it is something that I'm kind of working on, really.
What are you going to try to implement?
If I feel uncomfortable or uncomfortable with something, but also feel like I might have too much of a burden on me.
Okay.
Like I'm too overburdened.
Yeah.
Right? By something, by other people, even by other people just being around, or by other people what they're asking of me, to be able to say no. Like I'm not doing that. And like even now at work, I have a new position, so I'm not working in the same thing. I'm not working with the same kids anymore. Those kids have been coming to me and asking me for stuff because obviously they've worked with me for so long now. Yeah, and they are, and they know that I can help them with stuff. And you know, for me, I'm practicing that now, where I have to tell them like, look, hey, I can't help you. You know, I'm sorry, I really can't. I literally do not have the time. Yeah. And and so I've been I've been a little forced at work to do it because otherwise my head would explode. Yeah, exactly. And I already feel that way too. But if I try to put more on, I wouldn't be able to do it. You know, I wouldn't. I would feel horrible.
So setting boundaries in general to help take care of yourself.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I'm glad you said that. Exactly, setting boundaries for myself. That I think is really how I try to care for myself. That's nice. Is like setting boundaries with my family, setting boundaries at work, you know, setting boundaries with friends or whatever. So yeah, I think really that's the tool that I have now is trying to say, hey, look, I think this is as far as I can go.
Oh, that's great. I feel like a lot of guys feel, and I told this to Golan when we first started dating him. He's like, you're not Superman, you're not a superhero. You need to not say yes to everything and need to take a step back and relax and focus on you too. Because I see a lot of men just like put in the work to help so many people because they don't want to disappoint, I guess, in that role of masculinity. That at the end of the day, they either explode with anger or like some people, like a lot of veterans go to suicide or attempted suicide and stuff like that. And it's because men aren't allowed to say no or not allowed to express their emotions. Like, this is overwhelming. It's kind of like some people would be like, you're not supposed to be overwhelmed. We treat men like robots.
Yeah, no, it's true. And for me, for myself, one thing that I saw, and this was part of the struggle with Emily early in our relationship, in terms of the communicating of the feelings, right? And being emotionally open, was that there were moments where I was overburdened by Emily and that she was asking for too much, which is natural. It happens in friendships. That happens in any relationships you have. You know, it's always a balance, right? Like, how much can you do? How much can that person do? And especially in a romantic relationship, it is the back and forth, the give and take, you know, and it's about figuring out what works. But I remember that it was similar to Golan, you know, and to however many other people. When you feel like, no, I want to do this, you know, oh, whatever. But then you see yourself tired, you get upset. You're like much more irritable. Yes, exactly. Irritable. Yeah, exactly. And so you do these things for people, and like I would do things for Emily, but I feel put upon and I feel upset about it. And then I would be mean to her while I'm like doing this favor for her because I'm like, no, I'm tired of this. You know, like, why am I doing this? Oh, why should I do this? You know, and then I'm being mean to her when I'm supposed to be doing something nice. You know, so it's like,
you said yes, what's happening?
Exactly. It's true. Really, those boundaries are really important. That for me is what helps me kind of get away from that. Because if I don't set boundaries, then I will be put upon and then I won't really be able to do as well. And I won't really be able to be emotionally open and happy, really, and satisfied, you know?
Yeah, no, I think it's like, because Golem was also done there where, like, he said yes to too many things, and then he gets so upset, and I'm just like, why are you mad? There's another point that I wanted to make about Golem. What's it called? Let me see. It was something about, like, he did something, and, I don't remember. Damn it, I had it. That's so funny. Okay. Well, anyways, it seems that your love language to others is acts of service and stuff. Have you figured out what your own love language is?
I think something that I really appreciate and that I like in my life is having people around me, you know? So like quality time kind of thing. Yeah, so I definitely, for me, I like having people around me. I like spending time with people. And so I think that's definitely one of my biggest things, you know, just kind of being around people that I care about, you know, people that care about me.
We talked about machismo, and something that triggered, I don't know if this was on purpose, but machismo sounds a lot like what's that word? Masochist.
Yeah.
Machisto and masochist.
Yeah,
and I wonder if there's like a reason for it, you know?
It's true. It sounds a lot. And when you look at it,
too,
exactly. It's very similar. Yeah. I don't know. From what I've seen is if I see someone and they're being machismo or whatever, it's like, for me, that's the person that you don't really want to be around. First off, I don't really see the benefit to it. You know, I don't see it. And like a lot of people in my family, more in my extended family, because my dad is not really machismo, I'll be honest with you.
Oh, really?
No, he really isn't.
Oh, that's a good point. Like, how is your dad? Like,
no, he isn't. I know with him, he, now in his old age, he's different than he used to be. And I think that just people as they age, it tends to get a little bit, you know, rounder around the edges, you know what I mean? Where before, when they were younger, they were really sharp. You know, and I think they get a little dull. I remember when I was younger, my dad used to be a very angry person, and I think he still is inside. You know, but I remember he was like a volcano. That's what it was like. And I think when he was normal, it was fine. You know, he was a pretty emotional person. You know, I remember he would often talk about his feelings and being proud and, you know, all these things. So he was an emotional person in terms of what he said, and he was open in that way. But there was also, what I remember was also, not necessarily a threat, but the potential for him to be upset and to be aggressive, you know, and violent. Even though he was someone who, you know, on his face, you know, seemed like fine, you know, nice and stuff like that, which is fair. There was also like this like anger that was there that you were aware of. You know, it's like, oh no, that's my dad, like, you know, he could be tough. He could yell at you, you know, and, you know, he could hit you. It's hard to say because I was also pretty young when I lived with him. But that was part of my thoughts of him, you know, and now, especially reflecting on it and getting to know him better, you know, I see that he is an emotional person. You know, he's cried to me many times, honestly, as an adult. I remember that as a kid. I remember him being emotional, but I also do remember him being angry, being a pretty angry person. I don't know if I would say he's machismo, but he could be at the same time, because that might be the same thing.
Yeah. I feel like suppressing your emotions is part of it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, especially the anger. You know that you just let it build and then you
It's not healthy.
blow
I feel
up.
like that's why people have heart attacks, bro.
It's true.
The stress kills you. When they say the stress kills you, it could kill you.
It absolutely kills you. Yeah, yeah, stress kills you. Oh my god. No, I'm trying not to be stressed. I don't want to be stressed.
Carefree, bro.
I know. Yeah, I'm like, oh my god.
Set them boundaries.
It's true. Oh my god. Yeah, it's a silent killer, stress.
It is. Do you feel like in our generation, from your perspective, masculinity is changing and becoming more emotional? Are we ever going to get rid of the word masculinity and it's just going to be like... I mean, I feel like it won't, because there's always like that group of people, you know? But like overall, majority.
Honestly, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Sad.
I don't think so. I think it will change, of course, and I think it has. You know, honestly, I really do think it has. And just that standards in terms of what is appropriate, you know, or what is socially acceptable has changed, you know? But I do still think that masculinity in itself, there's a certain part of it that is also just natural in the terms of that there are literal differences between women and men. You know, like men do get deep voices. You know, they get big, they get hairy. You know, like, you know, all of that is true. You know, and I think it also helps perpetuate the ideas that you have that come with that. You know, and so it's like if men get big and strong and hairy, you know, then it's like that's manly. You know, and so it's like it's I feel like it's a little difficult too to kind of get away from that. Exactly. Yeah, where it's like it's already in the culture, right? It's already part of our society, you know, and our ideas. And then if our literal physical bodies, what we exist in, you know, kind of promote that to an extent, you know, it's hard to imagine really that it going away. You know, maybe changing, you know, maybe. I think, of course, definitely. I think it will change over time, and I think it really has. But I do still think that it'll just change. It'll just be something else.
You know what's funny? I actually have had this one conversation with a few girls, and it's like, and these are girls that are very much like, I want my guy to be able to feel safe and open and emotional and stuff. But like the first time a man comes to cry to them, they're like, I don't know what to do. They're just like, well, I've never seen this creature before. Like, it's such like, even like, I think one of the first times Golem probably cried, I'm just like, I don't know what to do. Because it's such like a foreign thing. Even like in our, like it's 2023 and it's still like very strange to see like a man crying out in the wild. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
What advice would you give to women or anybody else who has a partner who wasn't emotional and then suddenly like goes and becomes emotional to them? Like, how should they handle that?
That's interesting. What an interesting question. So I would say I think it depends on who they are. Because if it's someone who's asking too much of you, no.
Right.
You know, like if it's a stranger or like an acquaintance and this guy comes to you crying, you know, it's like, no, that's a red flag. Like, why are you coming to me? You know, like when people like trauma dump and stuff like that, it's along the same vein. You know, so it's like, and that's the thing too, that sometimes people, not just men, but will take advantage of others, of their emotions and of their sympathy and be like, oh no, you care about me. So, you know, I'm gonna cry to you.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And so I will say first, just examine who that person is. Okay. Are they worth spending your emotional energy on? Because for you to comfort someone and console them, whatever, that takes energy. And there's some people who don't care for themselves and they become a magnet for people to cry to. You know? The way, really point, the way that you're saying it sounds like it's relatable to you.
No, not really.
No.
I mean, only person that I've ever cried to me that I was just like, oh, well, this is new was Golem, I think.
Okay.
When my brother cries, I get really mad because it's usually over a girl, and I'm just like, oh, bitch. So like when it comes to my younger brothers, I become very maternal in that aspect. But when it's like to other guys, I feel like besides Golem, I don't know who else has cried to me. It probably has happened, and I'm probably like, come here, cry on my shoulder. But it's also like, I think also for me, and this is just my perspective. For a long time, I couldn't cry because my mom was like if you cry, I'm gonna give you something to cry about. So I was like,
wow.
oh shit.
Oh my
yeah,
god.
you've never heard that? Your mom never said that to you?
No,
Oh damn.
No, never. No.
I feel like a lot of people would relate to me, but from
I'm
like
sure.
my I guess I don't know if it's a Salvadoran thing, Central American thing, or like a Long Island thing, but I've heard it many times where like parents are like, if stop crying or I'm gonna give you something to cry about. Yeah. So I'm just like zip. So for a long time I was also emotionless.
I see.
To an extent. So when I finally got people like around me started crying, I don't know what to do. Like Stephanie, when I would cry to Stephanie, she's also like, what do I do? Poke you with a stick? Shit, I would literally be in the car next to her, and I would be crying in my driver's seat. She's in the passenger seat, like just staring at me.
Oh my god!
And I was like, I need to stop crying now.
That's funny. Oh my god.
So yeah, for me, it's been like a weird concept, but I know for other women, it's like also like kind of like a culture shock when a guy comes to cry to them.
Girl, boy, doesn't matter, or other. Examine who they are. That's the first thing. You can't be caring for everybody.
Yeah, true. From your perspective, like as a man, how would you want someone to take care of you if you're kind to them? Yeah,
of course. Honestly, I would say really just kind of treat them like if you have experience like consoling people, you know, if it's other women, like it's never been men, if you've consoled women, you know, family members, friends and stuff like that, which is more common, you know, especially among your own gender, you know, honestly, treat them the same way because it doesn't matter, you know, really at the end of the day, what people want, right? When they are in crisis, you know, when they are suffering, right? What they want is for someone to understand them, you know, and to hear them out. You know, that is really the most important thing. Yeah. You know, and so really, I think a big part of that, if you really want to care for this person and you determine that you want to use that energy to do that, you know, it's really just about listening to that person and trying to just understand what they're telling you. Yeah. You don't even have to agree. You know, sometimes you won't agree with what someone's saying, and maybe you might even be judgmental about what they're feeling or what they're saying to you. And that's also okay. But really, when that person comes to you, what they want is someone to accept them for who they are, you know, and to say, hey, I see what you're saying. I see you're suffering and I'm sorry that you're suffering. You know what I mean? And so that's what I would say. Like, just if you know how to actively listen, that'd be wonderful. You know, if you can, you know, just agree with them, if you can reflect what they're saying, you know, that'd be really nice. All of that is a little bit more like in depth. Like if you want to do that, you can. But at the end of the day, really just at least being able to hear them out and say, hey, look, I know that, you know, this happened at work and I'm really sorry that happened. You know, I saw that, you know, you said that your friend had an argument with you and that sounds really difficult and I'm sorry about that. You know, like I hear what you're saying and it sucks, you know? And so I would say that that's really just how you approach it with anyone, a man, a woman, just hear them out and say, hey, look, I'm sorry that happened.
Sergio, any last advice you would give to men that want to explore their emotions in therapy?
One, I think that, and I'm sure this is probably, people have said this before, but I think that your therapist matters. I've had a few therapists now, in different settings, and I can see within myself, like the people who have worked better for me. Like the one therapist that I remember that I really developed the best connection with, he was Hispanic and he was a little older than me. He was like maybe early 30s, I think. Okay. And he had a family and stuff like that. But kind of, for me, what I see as, you know, a Hispanic man who's clearly Hispanic and stuff like that, and I can kind of relate to that, but also someone who is clearly responsible, you know, and it was nice for me to have him as a therapist, because of the fact that I related to him, and I also kind of saw that was someone that I kind of wanted to be like, in the extent that someone that is responsible, that is stable, you know, someone that was stable in my life, you know, where in my life, honestly, I don't have necessarily that many people, and I haven't had that many people who have been stable. And so to see that within him, you know, a grown man too, you know, it was nice, you know, to have kind of that kind of figure. But that's what worked for me, because that was something that I was missing in my life, and it was good to have that, you know, and that affects, I mean, it's more like it's affected by who you are and what you want, you know, what do you work on? What has your life been like, you know? And so, I don't know, when it comes to that, thinking about the therapist that you have, I think is important. And then also just making sure that what you do in therapy, what you talk about in therapy, is an active process. Like, it's not just about talking about it. It's also about when you're not in therapy, continuing to think about it, and depending on what you're working on, but think about it a lot and try to challenge yourself. Like, if you want to do something, if you want to, I don't know, if you want to change a certain behavior. For me, a lot of what I've tried to do is change behaviors. And so if you want to do that, like, just try a little bit at a time. You don't have to, no one expects you to change overnight. And if someone does, it's unrealistic because no one changes overnight. But it's really do what you plan to, like, talk about what you plan to talk about in therapy, you know, whatever that might be, whatever your process is, but make sure to continue to do that when you're not, you know, talking to the therapist. Do it on your own too, because at the end of the day, your journey is yours. You know, you're the one who has to take charge of your own well-being, you know, and if that means that you have to change your behaviors, then that's what it is. But that's my experience with it, because that's what I focused on a lot. Thanks for listening to Journey with Jess.